Part 1. The morning started like any other morning on New Haven Colony. Children walked through the silver gates of the Central Learning Complex laughing and talking about their classes. Some carried backpacks filled with tablets and notebooks. Others held hands with their younger siblings, making sure they got to the right classrooms. The sun rose over the mountains in the distance, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. New Haven was a small colony compared to the big settlements near Earth. Only 12,000 people lived there, mostly families who wanted a quiet life away from the crowded planets. They had built farms and homes and schools over 3 generations. The colony orbited a peaceful star in a region of space where nothing exciting ever happened. That was exactly why people chose to live there. Inside the Central Learning Complex, teachers prepared for the day. Mrs. Katie Sullivan wrote math problems on the board in her classroom. Mr. Greg Patterson set up a science experiment about plant growth in low gravity. In the music room, students tuned their instruments for morning practice. The youngest children, barely 4 years old, sat in a circle listening to a story about Earth's oceans. Nobody noticed the ship that appeared in orbit above the colony. It was massive, 10 times larger than any vessel humans had ever built. The ship belonged to the Crithion Empire, a civilization that had ruled this part of the galaxy for 1,000 years. The Crithion believed they owned everything they could see, and they did not like when others disagreed. Emperor Jathic sat on his throne millions of miles away, watching a screen that showed New Haven Colony. He had been emperor for 200 years, longer than most humans lived. He had conquered hundreds of worlds and destroyed dozens of species who refused to obey him. When humans had refused to give him the mining rights he wanted in the Proxima cluster, he decided to teach them a lesson about power. His military advisors had suggested different options. They could destroy the colony's power station. They could capture important leaders and hold them hostage. They could send a threatening message and give humans time to reconsider. But Jathic had his own ideas about how to break a species' spirit. He had studied human history and noticed how much humans loved their children. He thought that if he hurt their children, humans would collapse and beg for mercy. The dreadnought in orbit above New Haven was called the Burning Sky. Its captain received direct orders from the Emperor himself. The weapon systems powered up, creating a humming sound that vibrated through the ship's hull. The crew members looked at each other nervously. Some of them had children of their own, though not human children. They followed orders anyway because disobeying the Emperor meant death. At exactly 8 in the morning local time, the assembly bell rang in the Central Learning Complex. All 5,731 students gathered in the main hall for morning announcements. Teachers stood along the walls. The principal, Mr. Victor Hayes, walked to the podium to welcome everyone to a new day of learning. The beam hit the building at that exact moment. It was not an explosion like humans used in their weapons. Crithion pulse beams were different. They created heat so intense that everything simply stopped existing. The building, the children, the teachers, all of them turned to vapor in less than a second. There was no time to scream, no time to run, no time even to understand what was happening. From orbit, the Burning Sky fired the beam for 30 continuous seconds, making sure nothing survived. The weapon carved a hole in the ground 50 feet deep. Sand turned to glass. Metal turned to gas. The playground where children had played just minutes before became a crater of black ash. Commander Lisa Grant was 3 hours away on a science vessel called the Horizon. Her crew was studying unusual radiation from a nearby nebula when the distress signal arrived. It was not a normal emergency call. It was the automatic signal that transmitted when a colony's main computer detected total system failure. Every human installation had one, designed to activate if something catastrophic happened. Lisa ordered her ship to jump to New Haven immediately. The journey took 90 minutes. During that time, she tried to contact the colony repeatedly. Nobody answered. She told herself there could be many explanations. Maybe their communication system was damaged. Maybe there was a solar flare interfering with signals. Maybe it was just a computer malfunction. When the Horizon arrived, Lisa knew none of those explanations were true. The colony was still there. The homes looked normal from orbit. The farms were intact, but where the Central Learning Complex should have been, there was only a smoking crater. The Horizon scanners detected no life signs anywhere near the impact zone. Lisa led the recovery team down to the surface herself. She had been in dangerous situations before during her 15 years in space. She had seen ship accidents and equipment failures and diseases that killed dozens of people. But nothing had prepared her for what she saw at New Haven. The crater was still hot when they arrived. Their environmental suits registered temperatures that would melt steel. Around the edges of the impact zone, Lisa found small objects that had been thrown clear by the blast. A backpack, burned but recognizable. A child's shoe. A melted musical instrument that might have been a flute. Her team worked in silence, documenting everything. They found no survivors. The pulse beam had been too powerful, too precise. It had hit the building during the exact time when every student and teacher would be inside. Lisa realized this was not an accident or a random attack. Someone had planned this very carefully to cause maximum death. 4 hours after they arrived, Lisa's communication officer received a transmission. It was from the Crithion Empire, broadcast on all frequencies so every human colony would receive it. The message was simple and brutal. The Empire showed footage of the burning sky firing on New Haven. They showed the building being destroyed. Then Emperor Jathik appeared on screen. The Emperor spoke in the Crithion language, but translation software converted his words to English. He said that New Haven was destroyed because humans refused to obey. He said this was what happened to species who defied the Empire. He said that humanity should surrender the Proxima Cluster and accept Crithion authority over all human colonies, or more children would die. Lisa stood in the ruins of the school, listening to the Emperor's message through her helmet speakers. Around her, members of her crew were crying. Some were angry, shouting at the transmission even though the Emperor could not hear them. Others just stood frozen, unable to process what they were seeing. Lisa felt something break inside herself. She had joined the space service because she wanted to explore, to discover new things, to help humanity reach for the stars. She had always believed that humans could find their place in the galaxy through cooperation and understanding. Now she understood that some species did not care about cooperation. They only understood force. She looked at the crater one more time, thinking about the 5,731 children who would never go home. Then she walked back to her ship to make her report to Earth. Part 2 President Helen Curtis had not slept in 3 days. She sat at the head of the long table in the emergency council chamber, watching the footage from New Haven for the 100th time. Around her, representatives from every major human settlement watched in silence. Some had tears on their faces. Others looked angry. A few just stared at the screen with empty eyes, too shocked to show any emotion at all. The United Earth Council had been meeting non-stop since the attack. They had watched Lisa Grant's report. They had seen the crater. They had read the list of names. All 5,731 children, along with the 340 teachers and staff who died with them. The youngest victim was a girl named Sophie Palmer, 4 years old. The oldest was a boy named Eric Stone, 17 years old, 1 month away from graduation. Helen had a granddaughter named Claire who was 8 years old. Claire went to school on Mars every morning. When Helen heard about New Haven, her first instinct was to call her son and tell him to keep Claire home, to hide her somewhere safe. But she knew that was impossible. Millions of human children went to school every day on dozens of different worlds. They could not hide them all. They could not protect them from an empire that had hundreds of warships and no conscience. The debate in the council had been fierce. Senator Paul Mitchell from Luna Colony wanted to surrender immediately. He argued that fighting the Crithion Empire was suicide. They had better weapons, more ships, and centuries of military experience. If humanity fought back, the Emperor would just destroy more colonies. Better to give him what he wanted and save lives. Admiral James Cooper disagreed strongly. He was 60 years old and had spent his entire adult life in the Earth Defense Fleet. He stood at his place at the table and spoke in a voice that shook with controlled rage. He said that surrendering would not save anyone. The Crithion Empire would just keep demanding more. Today they wanted mining rights. Tomorrow they would want human colonies as slave labor. Eventually they would decide humans were not worth keeping alive at all. Governor Rachel Lynn from the Titan settlement suggested running. She proposed loading as many people as possible onto colony ships and fleeing to unexplored space, far from the Crithion Empire. It would mean abandoning Earth and most of the established colonies, but at least some humans would survive. They could hide in the dark spaces between stars where empires never looked. Helen listened to all of them. She understood their fear. The Crithion Empire was more powerful than humanity in every measurable way. But she kept thinking about those children. She thought about their parents who sent them to school that morning, expecting to see them again at dinner. She thought about the teachers who died trying to protect students they loved. She thought about her own granddaughter, and every grandmother in every human settlement who would now live in fear. On the fourth day of debate, Helen called for a vote. She put forward a simple resolution. It did not explain what humanity would do or how they would do it. It just stated that the Crithion Empire had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed, and that there would be consequences. The vote was unanimous. Every representative, even Senator Mitchell, who wanted surrender, voted yes. After the vote, Helen met privately with Admiral Cooper in her office. The admiral was a tall man with gray hair and scars on his hands from his years serving on military vessels. He had fought in the brief war with the Rigel pirates 20 years ago. He had commanded rescue missions during the oxygen crisis on Europa. But he had never fought anything like the Crithion Empire. Helen asked him a direct question. She wanted to know if humanity could win a war against the Crithion. The admiral was quiet for a long time before answering. He said that with current weapons and ships, humanity would lose badly. The Earth Defense Fleet had 300 vessels designed for patrol and defense. The Crithion Empire had over 1,000 warships designed specifically for conquest. In a straight fight, humans would be destroyed within weeks. But the admiral also said that wars were not always won by the side with better weapons. Sometimes they were won by the side that wanted victory more. He said that humanity had something the Crithion Empire did not have anymore. Humans still remembered what it felt like to be afraid, to be weak, to face enemies stronger than themselves. The Crithion had been powerful for so long they had forgotten how dangerous a desperate enemy could be. Helen asked the admiral if he could send a message to the emperor. Not a long message with demands or explanations, just something simple that would let Jothic know humanity had received his message and was responding. The admiral said he could do that. He asked what the message should say. Helen thought about those children again. She thought about the parents waiting at home while their sons and daughters turned to ash. She thought about the moment when colony officials had to start making calls, telling mothers and fathers that their babies were gone. She thought about funerals for 5,731 empty coffins. She told the admiral to send one word, just one word that would let the emperor know his message was received and understood. The word was soon. Admiral Cooper composed the message himself in his office on the Lunar Defense Station. He addressed it directly to Emperor Jothic at the Crithion Palace. He sent copies to every Crithion military installation that humanity knew about. He also sent copies to every other species in the known galaxy, every neutral power and every civilization that had contact with both humans and the Crithion Empire. The message was simple. It contained no threats, no explanations, no demands, just the single word in both English and Crithion language, soon. When Emperor Jothic received the message in his throne room, he read it and laughed. The sound echoed off the high ceilings of the palace. His advisors laughed with him, though some of them looked nervous. The emperor called the message pathetic. He said humans were clearly in shock and did not know how to respond. He ordered his military to prepare for humanity's surrender, which he expected within days. His advisors agreed, but some of them were not as confident as they pretended. General Throck, who commanded the Crithion Home Fleet, asked a question that made the throne room go quiet. He asked what humans meant by soon. Soon until what? Soon until they surrendered? Soon until they begged for mercy? Soon until they accepted Crithion rule? The emperor waved away the question. He said it did not matter what humans meant. They were weak and defeated. Whatever they were planning would be meaningless. He ordered a celebration that night to mark another successful conquest. The palace filled with music and drinking and speeches about the emperor's brilliance. But General Throck did not celebrate. He returned to his command ship and looked at the message again. He had fought many wars for the Empire. He had destroyed many species who refused to submit. But he had learned something over his long military career. The most dangerous enemy was not the one who threatened loudly. It was the one who made a simple promise and then went quiet while they prepared to keep it. He ordered increased patrols along the border with human space. He told his ship captains to be alert for anything unusual. Most of them thought he was being paranoid. Humans were explorers and scientists, not warriors. What could they possibly do that would threaten the mighty Crithion Empire? On Earth, Helen Curtis gave a speech that was broadcast to every human colony, every station, every ship in space. She spoke calmly but firmly. She talked about the children of New Haven. She said their names, all 5,731 of them. The broadcast lasted 4 hours just to read the list. Then she talked about what the massacre meant. She said that humanity had spent 2 centuries building a civilization based on hope. Humans went to the stars looking for friends, for wonders, for new possibilities. They found beauty and mystery and countless reasons to feel grateful for existence. But they also found predators who only understood strength. Helen said that the Crithion Empire had made a terrible mistake. They had assumed humans would react like other species the Empire had conquered. They expected fear, panic, and quick surrender. What they did not understand was something fundamental about human nature. Humans did not break when you hurt them. They adapted. They learned. They became whatever they needed to be to survive. She looked directly into the camera with eyes that had not really rested in days. She said that humanity had sent the Emperor a message. One word soon. She said the Emperor probably thought it was meaningless, just shock or denial or empty defiance. But every human watching the broadcast understood exactly what it meant. Soon, the Crithion Empire would learn what happened when you slaughtered human children. Soon, they would discover that the peaceful explorers who wanted friendship could become something very different when given sufficient reason. Soon, they would understand why humanity had survived every challenge Earth had thrown at them for millions of years. Helen ended the broadcast with a simple statement. She said that humanity would never forget New Haven. The children who died there would be remembered. Their names would be written on monuments. Their faces would be preserved in museums, and their deaths would be answered. All across human space, people watched the broadcast in their homes, in public squares, in ship common rooms. Some cried. Some prayed. Part 3 Dr. Andrew Pierce had worked at the Mars Research Station for 40 years. He was 73 years old now, with white hair and hands that shook slightly when he held things. But his mind was still sharp, and he remembered every detail of every project he had ever worked on. Most of those projects were classified at levels so secret that even other scientists did not know they existed. The morning after President Curtis gave her speech, Andrew received a message on his personal terminal. It contained authorization codes he had been waiting his entire career to see. The codes unlocked files that had been sealed for 60 years. Ever since humanity first made contact with the Crithion Empire and realized how dangerous the galaxy really was, Andrew walked through the empty corridors of the research station to a door that most people thought led to a storage room. He placed his hand on the scanner, spoke his name, and entered the 16-digit code from the message. The door opened to reveal an elevator that went down into the Martian rock for half a mile. At the bottom was a facility larger than most people imagined existed. Hundreds of scientists and engineers worked in laboratories filled with equipment that looked nothing like standard human technology. They had been working here in secret for decades, preparing for the day when being weaker than the Crithion Empire was no longer acceptable. The project was called Reaper. It had started when human diplomats first visited the Crithion capital and saw the monuments to conquered species. Statues and plaques commemorated 17 different civilizations that the Empire had destroyed. Some had been wiped out completely. Others had been reduced to slaves or refugees. All of them had been more advanced than humanity was at the time. The founders of Project Reaper understood something important. Humanity could not compete with the Crithion Empire using normal weapons and normal strategies. The Empire had been building warships for 1,000 years. They had technology refined through countless battles. If humans tried to match them ship for ship, gun for gun, humans would lose. So Project Reaper took a different approach. The scientists studied the ruins of those 17 dead civilizations. They analyzed technologies that had been abandoned or forbidden because they were too dangerous, too unpredictable, or too morally questionable. They found weapons that the extinct species had been too ethical to use, devices that could have saved them but that they refused to build because of their principles. Humanity had principles too. But the children of New Haven had changed the equation. Ethics were important when facing an enemy who shared your values. Against an empire that would vaporize a school full of children just to make a point, different rules applied. Andrew walked through the facility. reading the latest progress reports on his tablet. Every station showed green status lights. Every project team reported ready for deployment. For 40 years, these scientists had been preparing weapons and ships and tactics that would give humanity a chance. Now it was time to use them. In orbit around Mars, massive construction facilities that usually built civilian ships were being retrofitted. Manufacturing plans that normally created cargo haulers and exploration vessels were replaced with military specifications. The transition happened so smoothly that it was clear someone had planned it long ago. Workers who thought they were building peaceful ships suddenly found themselves constructing weapons of war. Lieutenant Danny Walsh commanded a frigate called the Guardian on patrol near the edge of human space. He was 32 years old and had spent 10 years in the defense fleet without seeing real combat. His ship was designed to chase pirates and respond to emergencies, not to fight military battles. 2 weeks after New Haven, Danny received an encrypted data package so large it took his ship's computer 3 hours to download completely. When he opened the files, he spent the next hour sitting in his captain's chair, reading the same pages over and over because he could not believe what he was seeing. The package contained blueprints for a weapon system that would replace his ship's main guns. The technology was unlike anything Danny had seen before. It did not fire missiles or energy beams. Instead, it created a field that disrupted the fundamental forces holding matter together. Inside that field, the electromagnetic force that kept atoms bound to each other simply stopped working. Ships did not explode. They just came apart at the molecular level, dissolving into clouds of their component particles. The blueprints came with installation orders. Danny's ship would be the first of 300 to receive the upgrade. Engineering teams would arrive within days to begin the work. The installation would take 2 weeks. After that, his little frigate would carry enough destructive power to destroy any ship in the Crithion fleet. Danny read the technical specifications until he understood what the weapon actually did. Then he felt sick. This was not a defensive weapon. This was not something you used to protect yourself. This was designed for one purpose only: killing as efficiently as possible. The documentation included casualty estimates. A single shot from this weapon against a Crithion dreadnought would kill everyone aboard in about 3 seconds. They would not even have time to understand they were dying. He thought about those children at New Haven. He thought about how they probably did not understand what was happening when the pulse beam hit their school. 3 seconds was generous compared to what the Crithion had given them. Danny saved the files and sent a message to Earth confirming his ship was ready for the upgrade. All across human space, similar upgrades were happening. Every military vessel received new weapons. Every colony installed defense systems that had been in storage for decades. Mining facilities and asteroid belts began pulling materials at rates that would have been wasteful during peacetime. But now every resource humanity had was being focused on a single purpose. President Helen Curtis gave another speech, shorter this time. She spoke directly to humanity about what was coming. She said that for 2 centuries, humans had built their civilization on hope and exploration. They had believed the galaxy would welcome peaceful species who just wanted to learn and grow. The Crithion Empire had taught them differently. The galaxy was not interested in hope. It was not impressed by peace. The species that survived out here were the ones willing to do whatever necessary to protect themselves and their families. Helen said that humanity was about to become one of those species. They were about to use weapons and tactics that previous generations would have found horrifying. They were about to do things that would change who humans were forever, but the alternative was accepting that empires could murder their children whenever they wanted to make a point. She spoke the words that would define humanity's response. Humans had explored the stars with wonder and joy. They had built colonies based on hope for the future. They had approached the galaxy as students eager to learn. But the Crithion Empire needed to understand something fundamental about the species they had attacked. Humans were not just explorers. They were survivors. They had crawled out of caves and built civilizations. They had survived ice ages and plagues and wars that killed millions. They had faced every challenge their brutal home planet had thrown at them and adapted to overcome it. That ability to adapt, to become whatever was necessary to survive, was the most dangerous thing about humanity. Helen looked at the camera with eyes that had seen too much death. She said that humans had spent 2 centuries trying to be the peaceful species they wanted to be. Now the Crytheon Empire had forced them to remember what they actually were: the apex predators of Earth, the species that had dominated a planet full of creatures with sharper teeth and bigger claws through pure stubbornness and willingness to do whatever it took. The broadcast ended with a warning to the Crytheon Empire. Helen said they had laughed at humanity's one-word message. They had dismissed it as shock or empty threats. But every human understood what soon meant. It was not a threat. It was not a promise. It was just a statement of fact. Soon the Crytheon Empire would face an enemy unlike any they had conquered before. Soon they would discover that humans did not break when you hurt them. Soon, they would learn what happened when you made humanity angry enough to stop being civilized. In the secret facility under Mars, Andrew Pierce watched the final weapons tests. Everything worked perfectly. Every ship upgrade was ahead of schedule. Every new tactical system exceeded specifications. For 40 years, he and his colleagues had prepared for this day, hoping it would never come. Now it was here and they were ready. He thought about the children of New Haven one more time. He thought about all the calculations and moral debates that had gone into Project Reaper. The scientists had argued for years about whether creating such terrible weapons was justified. They had worried about becoming monsters themselves in the effort to fight monsters. But Andrew remembered something his mentor had told him 60 years ago, when Project Reaper first started. She said that having terrible weapons did not make you a monster. Using them against innocent children made you a monster. Building weapons to stop someone from murdering more innocent children just made you responsible. Andrew sent the final authorization codes to every military installation in human space. 300 upgraded ships received their launch orders. Part 4. 3 months after the massacre at New Haven, the Crytheon dreadnought Flame of Conquest was on patrol in the Arcturus sector. The captain was a veteran named Krell who had served the Empire for 90 years. He had destroyed rebel colonies and hunted down pirate fleets and enforced the Emperor's will across dozens of star systems. He was confident in his ship, his crew, and his place in the galaxy. The Flame of Conquest was one of the Empire's most powerful vessels. It carried enough firepower to level a planet, and shields strong enough to withstand attacks from multiple enemy ships. The crew of 800 felt safe inside their massive warship, surrounded by armor and weapons that had never failed them. The attack came without warning. One moment, the Flame of Conquest was cruising through empty space. The next moment, sensors detected a single human ship dropping out of faster-than-light travel 3,000 kilometers away. Krell looked at the tactical display and almost laughed. It was a frigate, one of humanity's smallest military vessels. His dreadnought outweighed it by a factor of 50. Krell ordered his weapons officer to target the human ship and destroy it. He wanted to send a message back to Earth that the Crytheon Empire still ruled this space. But before his officer could fire, the human ship activated something new. The weapon did not look impressive on sensors. It was not a massive energy beam or a swarm of missiles. It was just a localized field that expanded outward from the human frigate until it touched the Flame of Conquest. Then things stopped making sense. Krell's ship began coming apart. Not exploding or burning, just dissolving. The hull plates separated into their component molecules. The engines broke down into atoms that drifted away like smoke. The crew members felt their bodies losing cohesion, but they died before they could understand what was happening. In exactly 3 seconds, the most powerful dreadnought in the sector became a cloud of disconnected particles, spreading through space. The human frigate, commanded by Lieutenant Danny Walsh, scanned the debris field to confirm the kill. Then it jumped back to faster-than-light travel and disappeared, leaving no trace except the expanding cloud that used to be 800 Crytheon soldiers. The Flame of Conquest missed its scheduled communication with command. Search teams were dispatched. They found the debris field and analyzed it, trying to understand what kind of weapon could do this. The science officers were baffled. The destruction did not match any known weapon signature. It looked like the ship had simply decided to stop being a ship. 2 weeks later, 5 more Crytheon vessels disappeared, then 12, then 30 in a single day. Every ship that went missing left behind the same type of debris field. Scattered atoms, no survivors, no warning of what hit them. Emperor Jothic summoned his military council to the throne room. He demanded explanations. His generals and admirals stood before him, looking nervous in ways they had never looked before. They showed him the little footage that existed from ships that had managed to transmit before dying. The human vessels looked different now. They were angular and aggressive, painted in dark colors that made them hard to see against the void of space. They moved with speed that should not be possible for ships of their size. They fired weapons that violated everything the Crithion knew about physics, and they were everywhere. Human ships appeared in sectors that should have been safe. They ambushed patrol fleets. They destroyed supply convoys. They hunted down any Crithion vessel they could find and eliminated it with cold efficiency. General Throck, who had been worried about humanity's message 3 months ago, reported the casualty numbers. The Empire had lost 237 ships in the past month. Over 100,000 soldiers were dead, and the attacks were increasing in frequency and coordination. The Emperor demanded to know how humans had developed such technology so quickly. His intelligence officers admitted they did not know. Either humanity had been hiding advanced weapons for decades, or they had made scientific breakthroughs at impossible speed. Either way, the humans were no longer the weak prey the Empire had assumed them to be. Jothik ordered his fleet to go on full alert. He commanded his admirals to hunt down these human ships and destroy them. He wanted prisoners captured so they could be interrogated about their weapons. He wanted answers about how a species he had dismissed as primitive was now tearing apart his empire. Captain Nicole Hayes commanded a human warship called the Vengeance. It was one of the new vessels built specifically for this war, designed around the weapons from Project Reaper. Her crew of 400 had trained for 2 months in secret, learning to use systems that did not officially exist until the day New Haven was destroyed. Nicole was 45 years old and had 2 children of her own, both teenagers living on Earth. She had joined the military to protect them, to make sure they grew up in a universe where humanity had a future. After New Haven, protecting them meant something different than it used to. Now it meant killing anyone who threatened human children before they could strike. The Vengeance found its first target in the Deneb system. A Crithion cruiser was escorting a supply convoy, completely unaware that humans were hunting in this area. Nicole's tactical officer, Lieutenant Chris Morgan, locked the targeting system on the cruiser. The weapon charged up with a sound like distant thunder. Nicole gave the order to fire. The field generator activated, and the Crithion cruiser began dissolving just like the Flame of Conquest had months earlier. The crew of 800 died in 3 seconds, their bodies breaking down into constituent atoms that scattered into space. Chris reported the kill in a flat voice. Nicole activated the ship-wide communication system and spoke to her crew. She told them that was 1 ship for the children of New Haven. They had 5,730 more to find. The number was symbolic. The Crithion Empire had thousands of ships, far more than the number of children who died at New Haven. But humanity was not trying to destroy every Crithion vessel. They were sending a different message. For every child who died, 1 Crithion ship would be destroyed. When that count was complete, then humanity would consider what to do next. All across the border regions between human and Crithion space, 300 ships like the Vengeance were hunting. They did not hold territory or claim systems. They just killed. Every Crithion patrol they found was eliminated. Every supply convoy was destroyed. Every military installation within reach was attacked and obliterated. The Crithion Empire tried to adapt. They sent their ships out in larger groups for protection. But the human vessels were faster and could pick off stragglers. They fortified their supply routes with extra guards. But the humans just found different routes to attack. They pulled ships back to defend core systems, but that meant abandoning the outer colonies, which started rebelling as soon as the military presence weakened. Emperor Jothik watched his empire begin to crack. Species that had been conquered decades ago saw the Crithion fleet struggling and decided this was their chance for freedom. Pirates who had been suppressed for years started raiding again, knowing the empire was too busy fighting humans to stop them. Border disputes that had been frozen for generations suddenly became active wars. The Emperor sent a delegation to Earth carrying peace terms. He offered to apologize for New Haven. He offered to pay reparations to the families of the dead children. He offered to give humanity the Proxima Cluster and more besides if they would just stop the attacks. The human response came from Admiral James Cooper. He did not negotiate. He did not even read the peace terms. He just ordered the diplomatic vessel destroyed before it could reach Earth. Then he sent a message back to the Crithion capital with updated numbers. 2,847 ships destroyed. 2,884 remaining. Humanity was still counting. They were still hunting, and they would not stop until the count reached 5,731. Inside the Crithion Palace, the Emperor's advisors begged him to surrender. They showed him casualty reports and economic projections and predictions that the Empire would collapse within months if the war continued. They told him that humanity was willing to destroy everything the Empire had built over 1,000 years. But Jothic had ruled through strength for 2 centuries. He had never surrendered to anyone. He could not conceive of bowing to a species he had considered beneath notice just months earlier. He ordered his remaining fleet to gather at the homeworld for a final defense. If the humans wanted to complete their count, they would have to come through the full might of what was left of his empire. Admiral Cooper received intelligence about the Crithion fleet concentration. He gathered his captains for a conference on the command ship. Nicole Hayes was there, along with Danny Walsh and the commanders of all 300 human warships. Cooper told them the Emperor was making his final stand. The Admiral gave them a choice. They could continue hunting scattered ships across the galaxy, slowly working toward their goal of 5,731 kills. Or they could go to the Crithion homeworld and finish this war in one massive battle. The vote was unanimous. Every captain chose the direct assault. They had all seen the footage from New Haven. They had all read the names of the dead children. Part 5. The human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Crithion home system. 150 warships appeared simultaneously, their dark hulls barely visible against the stars. Admiral James Cooper stood on the bridge of his command ship, the Retribution, looking at the tactical display that showed what waited for them. 400 Crithion vessels hung in orbit around their homeworld. Every remaining dreadnought, cruiser, and destroyer the Empire could muster had been called back to defend the capital. It was the largest concentration of military power the Crithion had assembled in 200 years. On paper, it should have been enough to overwhelm the human fleet with ease. Cooper studied the enemy formation. The Crithion had arranged their ships in defensive layers, with the biggest dreadnoughts at the front and smaller vessels protecting the flanks. It was a solid military strategy designed by generals with centuries of experience. But those generals were thinking about normal warfare with normal weapons. Humanity was not fighting a normal war anymore. Cooper opened a channel to all human ships. He spoke calmly, like he was discussing the weather instead of ordering an attack that would kill hundreds of thousands on both sides. He reminded his captains why they were here. He did not need to say much. Every person in the fleet knew about New Haven. Every one of them had read the names of those 5,731 children. The Admiral gave the order to attack. The human fleet surged forward as one, accelerating to speeds that made the Crithion sensors flash warning alerts. The enemy opened fire first, launching missiles and energy beams that lit up space like a fireworks display. Some of the shots connected, tearing holes in human ships and killing crew members instantly. But the human fleet did not slow down. They did not try to evade. They just kept coming, closing the distance as fast as their engines could push them. When they reached weapons range, they activated the devices that had been built in secret under Mars for 40 years. The battle became chaos. Human ships fired their molecular dissolution fields at the Crithion dreadnoughts. The massive warships that had terrorized the galaxy for 1,000 years began coming apart like sand castles in a hurricane. Hulls separated into component atoms. Engines dissolved into clouds of gas. Crews died before they understood what was hitting them. The Crithion fought back desperately. Their weapons were powerful, designed to crack open planets. When they hit human ships, the damage was catastrophic. The frigate Defender took a direct hit to its reactor and exploded, killing all 300 crew members instantly. The cruiser Steadfast lost half its hull to a missile barrage and spun out of control, venting atmosphere and bodies into space. But for every human ship that died, 5 Crithion vessels dissolved into atomic clouds. The new weapons were too effective, too fast, too impossible to defend against. The Crithion commanders tried different tactics, spreading their ships out to avoid concentrated attacks, focusing fire on individual human vessels to destroy them one at a time. Nothing worked. The humans just kept coming, accepting casualties that would have broken any other fleet, driven by something deeper than military strategy. Captain Nicole Hayes commanded the vengeance through the chaos. Her ship had taken damage to its port side and 43 of her crew were dead. But the weapons system still worked, and that was all that mattered. She targeted a Krytheon dreadnought that was trying to retreat to safety behind the lines. Lieutenant Chris Morgan locked onto the target and fired. The field enveloped the massive warship and it began its death spiral. Nicole watched it dissolve and thought about the children of New Haven. She thought about Sophie Palmer, 4 years old, who died before she even knew what war was. She thought about Eric Stone, 17 years old, who died 1 month before he would have graduated. The Vengeance moved to the next target. Admiral Cooper watched the battle from his command chair. The Retribution had lost its forward shields and was taking fire from 3 directions, but it was still operational. Around him, his crew worked efficiently despite the alarms blaring and the ship shaking from impacts. They knew they might die in the next few minutes. They accepted it. This was what they had signed up for when they put on the uniform. After 3 hours of continuous fighting, the Krytheon formation began to collapse. Too many of their ships were gone. Too many of their commanders were dead. The survivors started breaking away, trying to escape to other systems. But the human fleet pursued them, hunting down every vessel that tried to flee. Some Krytheon ships surrendered, broadcasting emergency signals and powering down their weapons. The human fleet ignored them and destroyed them anyway. Cooper had given clear orders before the battle started. No prisoners, no mercy. This was not about conquest or territory. This was about making absolutely certain that the Krytheon Empire understood the price of murdering children. When the space around the homeworld was clear of military vessels, the human fleet turned toward the planet itself. The Krytheon capital city was visible from orbit, a sprawling metropolis of billions that had ruled the sector for 1,000 years. The orbital defense platforms had already been destroyed in the battle. Nothing stood between the human fleet and the planet. Cooper received a communication from the surface. It was Emperor Jothic himself broadcasting from his palace. The Emperor offered complete surrender. He offered to step down from power. He offered anything humanity wanted if they would just stop the attack. The Admiral listened to the message and then deleted it without responding. He had no interest in negotiating with someone who had ordered the death of children. Instead, he gave orders for the ground assault to begin. Landing craft launched from the human ships carrying soldiers who had trained for months specifically for this mission. Their objective was simple: capture the Emperor alive. Not for trial or justice, but to deliver a message that could only be given in person. Commander Lisa Grant led the assault team that breached the palace. She was the same officer who had found the ruins of New Haven 6 months ago, who had walked through the crater where a school used to stand. She had volunteered for this mission the moment it was announced. She wanted to be there when the Emperor faced consequences for what he had done. The palace was a fortress that had never fallen in Krytheon history. But the human soldiers had weapons designed specifically to crack fortresses. They blew through walls, disabled defense systems, and fought their way through corridors filled with the Emperor's personal guard. The fighting was brutal and close quarters. Lisa lost 20 soldiers getting to the throne room. She considered it a bargain. Emperor Jothic waited on his throne, surrounded by the last 100 members of his guard. They were the elite warriors of the Empire, trained since childhood to protect their ruler. When the humans burst through the doors, these guards attacked with weapons and claws in sheer desperation. The fight lasted 5 minutes. When it ended, all 100 guards were dead. Lisa stood in front of the Emperor, her rifle pointed at his chest. He looked at her with contempt and rage, unable to comprehend how his empire had fallen to a species he had dismissed as prey. Lisa told him to stand up. When he refused, she shot off his left arm at the elbow. The Emperor screamed in pain, a sound he had never made before in 200 years of life. She told him that was just the beginning. She had orders to make him understand what he had done. She made him recite the names, all 5,731 of them. Lisa had a list on her tablet, the complete roster of children who died at New Haven. She read each name slowly, and the Emperor had to repeat it. When he refused, she shot off another piece of him, an arm, a leg, fingers, whatever was necessary to make him comply. It took 3 hours to get through the entire list. By the end, the Emperor was broken physically and mentally. He had lost so much blood that he could barely speak, but he kept reciting names because the pain when he stopped was worse than the pain of continuing. When he finally spoke the last name, Eric Stone, his voice was barely a whisper. Lisa looked at him with cold eyes. She thought about all those children who never got to grow up. She thought about their parents who would never recover from the loss. She thought about the hole in humanity's heart that would never fully heal. Then she executed him. No ceremony, no speech, no dramatic final words. Just a bullet to end a monster. President Helen Curtis addressed the galaxy from the ruins of the Crithion Palace. The broadcast reached every species, every empire, every civilization that had watched humanity enter the galactic stage and assumed they understood what humans were. She stood in the throne room where the Emperor had ruled for 2 centuries. Behind her, soldiers were already documenting Crithion war crimes, gathering evidence of all the species they had destroyed, all the civilizations they had enslaved. The galaxy would learn exactly what kind of empire humanity had just eliminated. Helen spoke about the children of New Haven. She said their names deserved to be remembered across the galaxy. She said that humanity had not wanted this war. They had come to the stars looking for peace and friendship and wonder. They had tried to be the civilized species they wanted to be. But the Crithion Empire had forced them to remember something fundamental about human nature. Humans were capable of great,